First tonight to the Middle East, and some quite awful scenes there. Dozens of Israeli settlers, some wearing masks, have attacked a Palestinian village in the occupied West Bank. They burnt cars as they went and killed at least one person, seriously wounding many more. Israeli political leaders, including Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who often don't speak out when these kinds of things happen, have condemned the event, saying a full investigation is underway. The White House called it unacceptable, and the Palestinian Foreign Ministry has denounced it as organized state terrorism.
There
were around 100 settlers who were armed, and they were shooting. The people in the town who came to help when they heard what was going on, but they saw the gunfire. The settlers, were firing. They were firing live bullets. One person was killed, 2 injured, by bullets, and 1 was injured by stones. 2 were injured by bullets, and the person who was martyred is someone from the family. May he rest in peace. He came to help us like the rest of the youth.
With more on this, I'm joined by Arise International correspondent Faith. Good to see you, Faith. What more do we know about this attack and why these settlers attacked this Palestinian village? I mean, is there a clear motive for this attack?
So I can tell you that this attack happened in the town of Jit in the occupied West Bank. We know that one Palestinian man was killed in this attack. His funeral actually took place today. The attack itself began around 6 p.m. last night. A number of others were seriously wounded, at least one person in critical condition with gunshot wounds. As you mentioned there, the Palestinian ministry has described it as part of organised state terrorism, because of course this isn't the first time that we're seeing this sort of attack. One settler though has been arrested, which is a bit unusual. We know around 100 settlers were involved in the attack, many of them armed. And we have heard from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, as you mentioned, who said that he views this incident with the most severity.
And would it be fair to say that these settlers feel empowered to carry out these attacks because they know that nothing will happen to them? I mean, the Israeli military fails to intervene. Impunity has become the norm, and settlers feel emboldened by speeches of some members of the Israeli government.
I think you're right. I think they do feel empowered. They do feel emboldened. I mean, for instance, last night, we know that the Israeli army didn't show up until around 2 hours after the attack started. And the Palestinians there say that when the army did show up, they didn't really intervene. They fired up into the air, but they didn't really take any action. Likewise, the fire brigade did not come to help, despite the fact that many cars were set on fire. The Palestinians say that they feel abandoned just to defend themselves. But in this case, because so many of the settlers were armed, they had to retreat. They had no option. And that is part of why there was so much damage done, because the Palestinians were forced to back off. As I mentioned, part of a series of attacks since October the 7th.
And of course, we know that a lot of members of the Israeli government favour expanding these Israeli settlements, which are considered illegal under international law. But this time, though, the attack has drawn rare condemnation, as you mentioned earlier, from the Prime Minister and from even far-right ministers. Why are we seeing this right-wing government criticising these settlers when these attacks, as you said, have been going on for some time? I mean, is this incident different? Is it worse than what's happened before?
It is a big incident. It isn't particularly worse, especially in terms of the numbers of dead, than we have seen in the past. I think the criticism might be more relevant to who is in Jerusalem at the moment. We do know that the UK Foreign Minister and the French Foreign Minister are there as part of a visit. I think them being in the area might have inclined Netanyahu and the other ministers to come down a little heavier on this. Netanyahu, his office, saying that the riots that took place last night, those who carried them out will be held responsible for any criminal act. They'll be caught, they'll be prosecuted. But many activists say that this is just performative. These attacks do happen on a daily basis, and there is condemnation, but there's never much action to back up that condemnation. You know, Shin Bet and the Israeli army have said they're going to carry out a joint investigation, but many people don't expect that to come to much and don't expect anyone to actually face any retribution for this.
Right, so strong words of condemnation, but little significant action. As you said, Gaza is not the only place under attack. I mean, West Bank has also, and it is actually the larger of the two Palestinian territories, but it has also witnessed Israeli raids and attacks and so on. What about the fighting on the ground in Gaza? What's the latest that you're hearing?
So we know that Israel has once again expanded into what was previously described as safe zones. For instance, the Al-Mawazi humanitarian zone. 2 people were killed there today. Another evacuation order has been issued for part of Khan Yunis, which again previously described as a safe zone, as well as Gaza City coming under attack. A number of people killed there. I have also heard from people on the ground that eastern Deir al-Balah is facing a ground incursion from Israeli troops. We know as well that now that the death toll has topped 40,000, they're simply running out of space to bury the dead. You know, we've heard from graveyard keepers today that they're digging dozens of graves a day. There's simply no more room for bodies to go. We heard from the United Nations today as well. They are asking for a 7-day pause in the fighting, and that is because they are desperate to administer polio vaccines to around 640,000 children in Gaza, because of course infectious disease is spreading very, very rapidly too.
And in that regard, what's the latest from the Gaza ceasefire talks? Have they got off to a promising start, as one US official suggested?
The talks in Doha have now concluded. We know that Antony Blinken is planning to visit Israel. US sounding quite positive about that. Hamas less positive. They're saying no positive signals from Israel. But we did see a joint statement from the mediators, Egypt, Qatar and the US, which said that the talks were serious, constructive, held in positive terms, and that technical teams will continue to work on the details over the coming days. More meetings will be held again in Cairo before the end of next week. They still need to work out things like humanitarian arrangements and of course how to deal with the issue of captives and prisoners there. But they are adamant that the time is now. There's no more time. There should be no more delay acceptable. We'll have to wait and see what happens in that. But positive noises from them.
Right, but meanwhile, of course, the fighting continues. I mean, Israel not relenting in its
no, absolutely not relenting.
Prosecution of the war.
Well, no, and certainly we also heard from the Israel Foreign Minister today being quite vociferous about the issue of Iran, because of course we are still waiting for a response from Iran to the killing of Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran. And Israel Katz, the Israeli Foreign Minister, was very outspoken today, and he said he fully expected support from the UK and France to strike Iran if they were to hit Israel. And this comes off the back of Hezbollah displaying a video showing a number of heavy missiles in an underground facility. Hezbollah don't seem to be backing down. We haven't heard from Iran today, but Israel still seem keen to drag the Western powers further into this conflict.
Faith, thanks very much indeed. Very interesting developments there. Faith Orr is Arise International correspondent.